So, Andrew Thomas, all the way from not quite London, you're actually from out New Hampshire way, a place called New Forest in the UK. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, yeah, it's great to join you. Absolutely wonderful.
Now,
Yes.
you will notice the silence of Matt for a little while because he's not here. So I'm very sad. He got called away on family business, and so we always sympathise with that. But you and I will just have to make do with each other.
Well, that's fine by me. I hope his family business resolves itself. And I sort of feel I already know you, having listened to your podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's lovely, and that's how we got together. And here's a good example, Andrew, just quickly to people listening, that we are keen to talk about and engage with and discover things that are going on in the place. And we were talking a bit before, and you were talking about some of the names, in quote marks that we have on. What we do is we have people and people who are doing interesting things. And I was immediately attracted by what you call the rainbow map. And we've already, introduced that, but that's just one part. In fact, it's even the final emergent property. So perhaps if you just sort of take us back a little bit into who you are and how you got into this intriguing game of human behavior and human experience.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, no, it was wonderful that you sort of invited me to join you on this, because you have some really incredible people on this podcast: Dan Siegel, Deb Dana, Pat Ogden, all people I've got books on my desk. To join you and talk about a subject I find fascinating, it's really great of you to invite me. Sort of an unknown in a way. So I hope I don't disappoint, I suppose is what I mean. It's the needy
I'm,
side of me coming out there, but
yeah, I'm very sure you won't. And as they say, no, the only way people become known is because they do the Science of Psychotherapy podcast. No,
yeah.
yeah, but jump
So,
in. You
so
you started you started in the corporate world. You sort of had a transition in life, as quite a few people do.
yeah. I mean, going right back in a way, slightly unusual. I mean, I am dyslexic. I've probably been called dyslexic. Struggled to learn to read, but I struggled through and ended up with an MS in petroleum engineering from the University of Alaska, believe it or not.
Wow.
Uh, and then went in and worked for British Petroleum BP for a number of years until about 1992. Couldn't see my future in the old corporate setting, and then started a number of businesses in the UK and the USA in culture change, and also my technical side, data management. So developed one of the world's first online applications in Seattle in 1997,
Wow.
and sold those businesses off in the end of the 90s. But I carried on the coaching work with the top levels civil servants in the UK government, and top executives, in the corporate sector across Europe and the USA. But as the noughties went on, I started to think I was just working with really top people just to sharpen the blade.
Yeah.
And I became more interested in the psychotherapeutic end of it. And in 2009, I was so fortunate. I got a placement and started training on an MA in couple and family therapy. And I sort of found I came home then. And I really thought I'd be working with people, couples and individuals who every hour I spent with them would really be an important hour, rather than just sharpening the blade. And haven't looked back really, and really got into systemic therapy, psychodynamic therapy, and a whole range of things. I was just like a Hoover. I mean, I just wanted just to suck everything I could get my hands on up. And started to think I was getting reasonably competent. And then, to getting to your point, why here, why us now? the thought now, if I ever thought to myself I was getting reasonably incompetent, I sort of recoil from that now. 2013, Richard, I don't know if you ever had this, but clients came in and just sort of rocked my world, really, showed me how little I really knew. And it dawned on me that, in the room, I just had a whole human.
Yeah.
This narrative bit wasn't doing it. And I had a whole human, and in the same room with these people was a whole human. We were both physically, narratively, our thoughts, our emotions, the way our bodies were, everything was in that room. And unless I started to integrate, I sort of tingle a little bit, and even now when I'm talking about it, unless I started to try to integrate that whole thing, then somehow I was missing out, and so I then went on the embodied therapy route. But I don't know if it's a dyslexia or whatever, but a characteristic of mine has always been to try and make the complex accessible.
Yeah.
And so from 2013, I really went on a pathway which started to bring out things like the rainbow map to bring embodied therapy. I didn't really think about bringing embodied therapy to other therapists. I wanted to bring embodied therapy to my clients so that when therapy finished and they walked out with expertise.
Mm.
And I'm really a strong believer that clients and developing their psychoeducational and their expertise contributes to their resilience and their psychological resilience once therapy is finished.
Yes,
So
this is exactly what I mean. My history going back through Ernest Rossi, back through Milton Erickson, who was very much saying, what is it that you're bringing? And in fact, I think one of the things that Milton Erickson would be not terribly pleased with is the number of people who are trying to emulate him. The whole purpose is to find this creative framework in your room that emerges from yourself and the knowledge. But you didn't just make this stuff off the top of your head. There are a number of things that I'm looking in your background that you really referred to and extracted from. What were some of the components to this idea? We'll get to the actual beauty of this expressive this rainbow map that you utilized. But as you were working through these things, what were the highlighted elements that you really found you started to bring out and needed to be noticed and created in the room with your client?
The capacity for them to notice themselves, I think.
Mm.
If I were to think about what is the rainbow map, what are the at the high level, what are the main outcomes? The first thing is the increased capacity for clients to be reflective, to be able to notice themselves. Because we all therapists talk about reflexivity, being able to modify and change our behaviors in terms of what's going on within us and what's coming into us, and modify what we're saying and doing in relation to that. Well, in order for that to happen, we first of all reflection. So the rainbow map and the model I developed, this high level model, the psychoeducational model, the reflective mind, reactive brain body model, they're there to enable clients to be reflective by distinguishing core streams of activity within them. And then with concepts such as the trigger cycle and the trigger flag, which we can touch on as you see fit as we talk
We'll
about,
do that in a moment. Yeah.
to actually then step off and be, step into the world of reflexivity. Because it started to dawn on me that unless clients can notice themselves triggering, you can't do anything about it. There's wonderful therapy going on all over the world in therapy rooms, and then the client goes out of the therapy room. But like the proverbial frog in the pan of water, unless you can notice things changing or yourself changing, it's very hard to jump out of that pan. So concepts like the trigger flag came into being. I mean, I'd love to say it all happened on one day, but it didn't work like that. I mean,
Yes, wouldn't it like to be great to be the resounding genius that discovers everything?
yeah,
But
yeah,
uh,
no.
it emerges. But let's have a look at this this final thing that comes up at the end. I think that's someone's car being stolen out. Oh no, somebody's already stolen it. Excellent. Uh, but so this is the top end. This is the usable aspect. Let's start there, and we'll come back down, because the map that you've developed is this um, uh, a page. It comes on a page. It's something you write on. Has got divisions and frameworks, and utilizes color. So a dyslexic, it just seems totally natural. I understand now why color became a part of the frame, because that enhances your understanding. But I'm sitting here, and now we will be putting an article about this in the next magazine, so people should come in and they'll be able to see these things in actual on a printed page. But if you could just describe, because the nature of the way the map works out, I'll just quickly say what I see, which is on one axis you have the levels of triggering, and you can describe those levels, and then across the top axis we have 3 or 4 columns describing different different ways in which, inner and outer and physical, and then the last one that it all winds up to is what's called the trigger cycle. So if you could give us a verbal picture of this page. So a client is sitting there and they've got this page with colors and these axes, and what is the opportunity they have there to really delve into their own understanding of themselves?
Well, from the visual side of it, it literally is the rainbow map colors. So at the top level is a red band, which is the hyper at the hyper end, hyper triggering. If you're in a real at the top end, you're in an absolute frothing rage. Sort of your reflective mind is shut down, and you are just full of reactive brain and reactive body, full of compulsive behavior. And then it shades down into orange, where there's a bit of reflective mind, but there's still a lot of compulsive behavior going on, compulsive emotions, compulsive thoughts. And then it shades down into the yellow band, where you're starting to have a fair amount of reflective mind available, but there's still quite a lot of agitation. So you're triggering up that transitional area. And then you get to the green band, which is where you are relatively okay. So if you like walking the dog, going to the beach, whatever, that might be the sort of thing you're doing when you're in that green band. And then shading down below that into blue, that's when you're starting to down regulate, triggering down. So you're getting quite sad, maybe a bit disconnected, maybe a bit critical of yourself, and then shading right down to the bottom, which is really, really disconnected, really in the depths, really depressed.
Yeah.
And so it's there to reflect sort of the gamut of the fight, flight, sort of hide, play, dead survival system that all we humans carry around with us 24/7. And then the focus is what do you notice about yourself? So when therapists are working with clients, then they're working with the first column, which is around what emotions do you notice at those different levels? What types of wishes, if you want to think of the wishes as the narrative component of emotions, what type of styles of thinking do you notice that are going on within you? What maybe are typical thoughts you experience at those different levels? And then across, and this is really where it starts to connect, bolt into the polyvagal theory for any of your listeners who are into that. It starts to then look at, well, what are the sensations you're experiencing and what sort of mannerisms can you notice? So an example, it's being used by therapists all over the world now. So I'm getting feedback from lots and lots of different people in all sorts of different cultures. And one of the big things it does is it adds granularity. So
Mm.
rather than being sort of totalized by your experience, your triggering experience, what it's doing is enabling you to distinguish what's actually happening, you know, within you, rather than just it happening and you, in a way, just being your behaviors or whatever, just being the outcome of that. You can actually notice that.
Yeah,
So
what I like in that, as I was looking at it, because sometimes in these observant things, which and they're terrific, other versions of different things, but we're looking at a particular event, and I'm looking at where I was up and where I was down, and so on and so forth. Uh, but I could very comfortably fill out all the areas in this, looking at myself as a whole. And so I'm starting to discover. So now, come on, Richard, be honest with yourself. You get fully triggered. There are those moments. What are you like when you're fully triggered? And so it it kind of encouraged me to be honest, because it wasn't saying, tell me what you do when you're being a bad boy, or
yeah,
you're being bad, now tell me what you're doing. It's sort of like, well, you all know we do these things. And that's why I like the this final column, where you seem to have an opportunity to put all these things in a perspective, this trigger cycle. And I notice in the example that you've got on the page, uh, on the website, that there's sort of movement and arrows, and they're putting different time frames. And uh, and I really related to that, because I thought, uh, when I get really triggered, that really one in those stuff, how long do I do it for? And then when do I start making the shifts and changes? How long do I stay? Now this
yeah.
gives me um, uh, a lot of insight into myself. So what I do and the timing that I do it in. I'm imagining that. Well, what I'll say is that's what I imagine, Andrew, as the creator and expert in this. How am I going in
It's
understanding it?
wonderful to hear you say that, because that's just absolutely where that I was hoping, that's exactly what that thing is about, that the trigger cycle. I mean, I stumbled on it really. I mean, I'd like to say it was some really consciously thought through, like, oh yes, it's the trigger cycle. But as I started to work with the Rainbow Map in 2015, that cycle was just the way they were talking about where they were going on the rainbow map.
Yeah.
I started to see that there appeared to be a pattern. People who went above to the higher ends of the yellow and into the orange and red areas always then started to seem to talk about being down regulated afterwards,
Right.
which really got me thinking, what's going on? Why do I keep seeing this pattern? What's going on? And then I started to think about, well, because I'm very into evolutionary psychology, and I started to think, well, is there an evolutionary reason for that cycle? And I started to think, well, 100,000 years ago, if you really ran away from a tiger, you didn't run away like, oh, I think I can just get away. Yeah, I'll just run away at half speed and I'll survive. Now, you gave everything you got to either fight off the threat or get away from it. And so we lived in a world of 100,000 years ago, whatever time you want to go back, where our predators, be they human or animal, were hypersensitive to movement.
Yeah.
And so it would seem like an evolutionary positive outcome then to cause us to downregulate, to stay still, to not move for a period of time until we charge back up again, so that we can then do fully another fight flight. And so I introduced the trigger cycle around about 2016. And yeah, it was, I can remember 2016, 17, working with a couple. And the woman, it really floored me. Really, she went through the cycle about how they went into this really credible arguments, and then they came out, and then afterwards she went deep into this sort of down-regulated, triggered down state. And then I can remember her saying, but then I pretend to recover, because hey, the world has to go on, the family has to go on. But as soon as I pretend to recover, I go down deep, and it takes me a week to recover. So that really, as you could see, really added granularity, and her partner was in the room, really enriched the conversation. And so the trigger
Yes,
cycle
looking
now,
at.
go ahead,
No, I
sorry.
was just going to say, giving her insight into the impact of this hyper uh, triggered this getting into that really chaotic. What I'm just seeing the chaos and the rigidity sort of frames as well. So that's really interesting, and I'm imagining that in that story that the husband you're suggesting found that surprising. That's not the way he responded. So
Uh,
when he looked at his cycle, it was different. And that
yes.
must have been a huge insight for them, because that thing that you do with your partner, we say, why aren't you recovering like I am? Or why aren't you whatever it is you're supposed to
Yeah.
be?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what you get, I mean, people have different trigger cycles in different situations. But say in couple work, you may find there's a certain area where the conflict is, and this works also in individuals. Although you may not have the other parts of the system in the room, but yeah, if one partner has got a trigger cycle of say 3 or 4 days, and one of them's got a trigger cycle of half a day, well, by the end of the day,
Uh,
the one with half a day so saying, "Hey, what are we going to do for the weekend? What we?" And the other one who's still, right down there, is not hasn't recovered, is saying, "The last thing I'm going to do this weekend is anything with you," which then will trigger another cycle off. So, so by actually the couples and in individual work, by starting to notice that you've got this cycle, it gives you more access points. Or, when I said earlier on, what is the rainbow map about? It's about noticing you're in a system. And one of the big drivers behind that is, I don't know how much you know, I see systemic therapy in virtually all mainstream therapeutic approaches, but
yeah,
it's
yeah, we
it's
do
quite
too. Yeah.
yeah, it's quite conceptually, there's quite a lot of theory and concept around it, and it can be quite tricky as a therapist to implement it and do it really well. And I thought, well, can I actually make my clients, my therapist, is that a Freudian slip there?
That's right.
Um,
Yes, I'm sorry.
Certainly my teachers. Uh,
Yeah.
can I help? Can they become systemically expert without having to have all of that theory in it? And so I actually thought one of the other outcomes of the rainbow map is by actually noticing a system within you. So as your body goes like that, my thoughts go like this, and as my thoughts go like this, I notice this thing about my body, and then and you see this reacting system within you, which is your own information. You can't deny it. It's there. It's within you, and in a way, that's in a way your own masterclass in the systemic world that sits around you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
sorry.
so important. No, no, that's good, but so important because I just coming in there because this idea from and I talk about in my books and various things, thinking in systems. Actually, if you think in a systemic way rather than in a linear sort of way,
Yeah.
that you understand that the thing that you observe, the overall most apparent thing, is actually comprised of elements. There's absolutely, and so differentiating them is a way in which you can actually alter what emerges, that emergent thing. And so there's these very simple, but I think they're the most fundamental elements to break it down to. As you said, the emotions and wishes, the styles of thinking and typical thoughts, and then the physical sensations and mannerisms. If you can just manage to bring yourself and the average person down to those three elements and see them working as you've just described, that's what comes out, which might be a rage or which might be a collapse or might be, um, and it takes the pressure off the emergent behavior. I think is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Oh, it's wonderful to hear you say that. When you write stuff and do stuff and then hear it reflected, sort of like the message that's getting, it's coming back what you hope the message will be. So the what I know, the 2015, I early versions of the rainbow map I knew were having positive outcomes. few of my colleagues were showing interest, but I was very select, very careful in who I was training. And I wasn't really going out to train then. And I thought, well, yeah, there seems to be something here. And so 2016, 17, and into 18, I sort of went into PERDA, really, because I really just deepened the theory base below it.
Right.
And in doing that work, you know, the immense complexity, you know, where neuroscience is going, evolutionary psychology is going. And I went on lots of training courses, and I heard people talking, you know, about the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, you know, I can't even say these words.
That's right. Good. You're being a good dyslexic. It's fine.
Cerebellum and all
Yeah.
the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, and there was sort of like this emphasis, well, psychoeducations mean, in a way, your clients, do they have to become a walking compendium of the what's in the brain? And I thought, well, can I actually somehow melt this down to what the core non-negotiable elements are of what's going on, which sounds really a bit, sorry if that sounds a bit arrogant or whatever, and
No, not at all.
shoot me down in flames. But I started to think, well, what is really going on here is we have, in terms of neurological activity, we have reflective neurological activity and reactive neurological activity. And you see that as the basis of the rainbow map. And then I break the neurological activity down really into two components: the reactive brain and the reactive body. And then the reflective bit is the reflective mind. And if you, so I'm not saying I'm the only person to talk about mind, brain, and body, but maybe what I've done is packaged it in the reflective mind, reactive brain, and reactive body that is very accessible by therapists and their clients.
Well,
So,
one of the things I really do like is particularly looking at the trigger cycle, this end column where you're looking at the movement, is I could look at anybody's map and understand that, no matter what language. Now, there may be
yeah,
elements, because I notice here that you've got this from a whole bunch of different cultures. So it doesn't impinge on culture, because culture is embraced by the nature of it. There's different people around Europe, different ages. There's a lovely piece here written by someone saying that their 17-year-old client really started to get a hold of themselves and a grip of themselves. And you know, I think it's that's also one of the elements. I mean, obviously, there are quite a few words that will be written into the map that it would be handy for you to know you know, the meaning of them as you go through, but particularly that cycle. So there's a universality, I think, is what I'm getting at. Reading it as a therapist, but also as someone filling it out. They can put whatever they like, you know, whatever is their hierarchy of needs.
yeah. Well, I've sort of been running alongside a sort of a grounded theory research project alongside, just to, as people provide feedback, it's a way of collecting that in. Obviously, it's a very non-intrusive way of finding out what's going on. But as you say, when the first article came out in Therapy Today, which is the BACP, the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists, their flagship magazine, when the first article came out, I mean, I delivered the Rainbow Map workshop, which is a sort of a 5.5-hour online workshop. When I delivered it a number of times, but I was just really bowled over by the reaction to the article, absolutely amazed. And I never thought I would see person-centered therapists coming on something that's apparently seems so structured. But I think what they've seen, like you're seeing, is there is some structure there, but it's a vehicle for clients to express themselves. Yeah, and one of the things that's coming through that grounded theory thing is this: there's a normalizing effect that clients see this blank piece of paper, and yet they map onto it, but it's obviously not designed for them personally. It's designed
Yes.
it's for any human, and
Yeah.
so to suddenly find that you map onto something that every other human maps onto, for many clients, it's a very reassuring thing. Like I'm somehow not uniquely blighted in this world.
Yeah,
That
similarity and difference at the same time, which is
yeah,
nice.
yes, yeah, and so therapists from all mainstream modalities, you name it, Jungian therapists, systemic therapists, obviously,
Mm.
psychodynamic, IFS, EFT, all sorts of therapists come on and then integrate it. And Richard, the most rewarding thing, I think one of the most, they do things I never dreamt of with it.
Yes.
That never dreamt of. I never thought, God, yeah, I never thought of using it like that.
Yeah.
And I've
And
learned so much. And they come on the workshop, which is very, I mean, I like going on workshops where at the end of it, I sort of like really have had hands on. I know I can make that step from workshop to practice rather than it's all theory. And they actually use it and they're saying, well, I could use it like this or do this. And then I get feedback. There are psychosexual therapists. I'm not a psychosexual therapist. They're using the green band as a way to see, well, relative to all your other experience of sex, or intimacy, the green band, let's talk about where relatively it's been okay for you. And
yeah.
then let's move away from that where it's not been so okay for you. And
And
I think,
I
go
was just
ahead,
saying,
sorry.
but this nice thing of what it gives you as a therapist. One of the things that I've been looking at quite a bit is the nature of we have current issues, which is really sort of a counselling and a sort of a psycho counselling, but then we have deeper issues and more historic issues, which become more of a psychotherapy. And as you're working through these triggers. And you're laying a bit of a map, a bit of a plan expression of the way in which the triggers emerged, I can see that you're able then to work with a client. Okay, so which triggers are doing this, and let's find out where those triggers are coming from. So, like for example, there would be a lot of what I would call psycho-counseling triggers that we've got at the moment, which is COVID-19, being stuck
Yeah.
in. It's just straight out, what's happening today. But at the same time, some people will be finding upsets which go back to perhaps earlier childhood illnesses or various other bits and pieces. And this gives them an opportunity to go, wow, how come that little trigger event there that I'm talking about seems to be so rich and deep? That's more than I would. The possibilities are endless. Is basically what I think. I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm reflecting.
It's being used in extraordinary ways. I mean, with survivors of suicide, for example.
Mm.
I mean, the therapists working with them, obviously using it very carefully because
Yes.
you don't want a re-traumatization experience. But it appears to be, with care, obviously, useful for survivors of suicide to actually then use the rainbow map to look into that
Well,
experience.
it's externalizing things, which
Yeah,
is putting it out there onto the page, and I can look at myself rather than having to sit here remember it, and it's much safer.
that externalization and a big thing that while you raise that is that what it does is it helps clients also, and it's a general theme coming in, is notice how automatic they can be. So as you
Mm.
move into the yellow and into the blue zones and you go up, how your behavior becomes more compulsive, how automatic, and you can actually see that gradation. And as you start to notice your own behavior and how automatic it can be, then it's not a massive step, in therapy to think, well, others around me can sometimes become automatic. And then within this are the seeds of forgiveness, the forgiveness
Mm.
of yourself,
Mm.
the forgiveness of others. I don't want to portray it. It's just like a light for everyone that comes on, but depending on how you want to work with it, those possibilities open up.
That's right. It enhances the possibilities of it. That's right. I was just about to say the same thing. And now we're probably sort of getting to a bit of a point of wind up. We know our listeners have about a half hour fascination level, and then
Yeah.
I don't know, they have to go to the bathroom or something, so they stop. But So you're doing trainings in this. What I mean, obviously, at the moment, things are a bit difficult about traveling around and doing things face to face. Are you doing online trainings through the website, or what's the
Yeah,
way you're doing things at the moment?
well, I run this as not for profit, first off. And the other thing is, for therapists in private practice, I've been told I should charge far more, but I charge as little as possible, because
Okay.
if my personal belief is, if we're interested in diversity in our profession, we also have to think about diversity of how deep people's pockets are.
Yeah, I
So,
agree with you. Yeah,
so otherwise, we're just going to become a profession of those who can afford the ongoing training.
yeah,
And so in the UK, it's £45, and a third of that goes to a homeless charity in the UK. And in any other country, the a third of the anything that's charged will go to a local homeless charity, because of that connection between mental health issues and homelessness. Um,
mm.
and then for charities, I deliver this free of charge. I mean, they do try to pay me, but I just say that I'll just give the money. I'll just donate the money straight back to you. So
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So when I sold my businesses, it gave me a certain degree of freedom, uh, and I'm motivated, by other things. I'm just the work, the knowledge, and I mean, I've been working with charities. As you can imagine, there's an overwhelming demand amongst people who can't afford normal therapy, to pay for private therapy. There's for people to access therapy at very low cost. So I've been working with a lot of charities, say in South Africa, for example. I've trained a lot of therapists there across the UK, delivering therapy to people who can't otherwise afford private
yeah,
therapy. So, so I find that really motivating, and so the workshop is 5.5 hours long. If you want to get stuck into the theory, I send out a load of information on the background theory a couple of weeks beforehand. People could knock themselves out and go as deep as they like into the theory. But the actual workshop is virtually all actually being the client or being the therapist and actually working on your own stuff.
working with the
Because this
practical
is
frame of it. Yeah,
this is an experiential tool. So
mm.
it's not so, you can talk about it, but actually experience it as a client or as a therapist is the way you really connect with this, in my view. And the other thing about this rainbow map, and I've learned so much about myself as I've worked with clients with it. A few years ago, I noticed I didn't go down into the blue zones quite so much. And I realized, because I don't typically experience depression or anything, but it scares the hell out of me. You
Oh,
know,
yeah,
when you talk to clients and the length they can be depressed and sad for.
mm.
So yeah, you learn stuff about yourself when you do it as well, and
Yeah,
get involved in it. So the workshop's available online. I keep the workshop size down to maximum 12, because
hmm,
that really keeps the interpersonal connection up. And there are literally now, by the end of the year, we'll have trained over 500
mm.
therapists. I'm already training up other therapists to deliver the workshop, because just the demand is, people come on it and then they recommend it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, it's incredibly rewarding, because it may be a simple page, but literally thousands of solitary hours went into this.
Yes, we can really appreciate that, and so that's fantastic. People access, and we'll leave links to all that sort of stuff on the show notes, as people are finding the fascination. They can go and check it out and delve into all those deeper aspects. But I guess at this point, as we get to that time to sign off, is there anything that we've not really clarified or not really put forward, or is there just a sort of a beautiful hand sweeping final comment that you'd like to make?
I, 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 uh, I just want to thank you so much for giving me a chance, to talk to you, someone, and share this with you. I mean, it's really wonderful. This bloke who came out of the blue in the UK, and you've reached out, and I just want to thank you so much for that opportunity. It's been great talking to you, and I enjoy your podcast so much, and the where you go with it. And the
Thanks.
other thing is, I suppose the only sweeping thing is that what I've tried to do is use client language.
Yeah.
Uh, 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 and that's why the words are triggering are in there, or triggering up or triggering down. And this is about using client language and making something really profoundly accessible to clients, so
Yeah.
they don't have to go, and study a whole new thesaurus. So what I've tried to do is learn from my clients and then return that favor to them through the rainbow map.
Well, it suits me a lot because being responsive to clients is to me, the most important new phase of therapeutic change, and this is a great example of that. So, for now, Andrew, so wonderful to have you and listen to you share the stories, and for us to go over some of the theoretical frameworks. And we'll say goodbye for now, but we look forward to people seeing your article, and we look forward to seeing the rainbow map appearing all over the place. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's been great fun. Thank you.